Most people spend their lives running from pain, from truth, from themselves. They scroll, they numb, they hide behind routines and lies, all to avoid facing the one thing that could set them free: reality. But what if you stopped running? What if, instead of distracting yourself, you walked straight into the fire? What if you confronted every weakness, every fear, every buried truth, and used it as fuel to forge something unstoppable? Not a fragile ego, not a fake persona, but a mind so disciplined, so fearless, so sharp, that no one can manipulate it, not even you. They will call you cold, unfeeling, detached, dangerous. Good, let them. Because if they can't understand your silence, they'll never survive your power. And power, true power, begins in the mind. Not the soft mind that flinches when reality bites. Not the fragile mind that needs constant validation, but the terrifying mind. The mind forged in fire, hardened by suffering, sharpened by brutal self-honesty. Most people don't want that kind of strength. They say they do, but they lie. Because that kind of strength requires death. The death of comfort, the death of illusions, the death of who you were when you still cared what others thought. You want to build a terrifyingly strong mind? Then you must first understand this. The world doesn't want you strong. It wants you obedient, entertained, dependent, easily shaken, easily baited, easily broken. So the very first act of defiance is to stop letting the world dictate what you believe, what you chase, what you fear. The second act, you start thinking, deeply, ruthlessly. You tear your beliefs apart. You burn the false gods. You question everything, especially yourself. Because a strong mind is not one that clings to answers. It is one that survives the demolition of all answers and still stands. You must choose to suffer. Not because you're a masochist, but because suffering voluntarily endured turns the soul to steel. Let pain carve you. Let solitude suffocate the weakness out of you. Walk willingly into the night, into the doubt, into the abyss of your own mind, because only there will you find what others fear: your edge. The average man runs from the abyss. You build your home on the edge of it. You smile while others tremble. You thrive while others drown. Because you don't just face the dark, you own it. A terrifying mind isn't loud. It doesn't boast. It watches. It calculates. It chooses words like blades and moves like a ghost. It's not driven by revenge or ego. It is driven by dominion over self, over time, over thought. It looks into the void and dares it to look back. And if you're waiting for motivation, stop. This path isn't for those who wait for lightning to strike. It's for those who become the storm. You build a terrifying mind by mastering your instincts, transcending your emotions, holding your ground while your internal world burns, and never blinking. You train for pain. You expect betrayal. You prepare for isolation. Because when it comes, you won't fold. You won't flinch. You won't even pause. A terrifying mind is prepared to walk alone into hell and still come out smiling. Because it knows that, on the other side of hell, is freedom. Not the kind they sell you, but the kind you earn. The kind you carve into your bones by staring down every weakness, every doubt, every comforting lie, and killing it, over and over again, until the only thing left standing is you. Not the version they molded, not the mask you wore, but you, unbreakable, unshaken, unleashed. So let them call you cold. Let them fear your silence. Because when the world burns, they'll be screaming. And you'll be walking through the fire, grinning, Because you didn't just survive the dark, you became it. You felt it, haven't you? That quiet pull to become more, to stop playing small, to stop hiding behind distractions, to finally face everything you've buried. That's not weakness calling you. That's your future self, demanding to be forged. But becoming unstoppable doesn't happen by accident. It's a process, a crucible, a war you must willingly enter. So if you're ready to stop running, if you're ready to build a mind that bends to no one, here are the 6 phases to face the darkness, own your weaknesses, and sculpt a mind so relentless, the world has no choice but to respect it. Phase 1, the shattering. Reality doesn't whisper, it breaks. There comes a moment, silent, personal, and earth-shattering, when everything you've built in your mind begins to collapse. Not because the world turned against you, not because someone betrayed you, but because you finally stopped lying to yourself. The illusion crumbles, the mask slips, and what's left is raw, exposed, unfiltered truth. This is the shattering. It doesn't come with warning signs or gentle nudges. It's violent, it's painful, but it's also the only way forward. You've spent years building a fragile identity around distraction, denial, and comfort. You learned how to avoid the hard questions. You told yourself stories about why things weren't your fault. You pointed outward when everything you needed to fix was inward. But eventually, the weight of your own excuses becomes too heavy to carry. The contradictions become too loud to ignore, and the pain of staying blind becomes greater than the fear of seeing. That's when the collapse begins. The career you thought defined you feels hollow. The relationships you clung to start suffocating you. The image you built to please others dies right in front of you. And in that moment of death, you're given a choice. Collapse completely, or step through the fire. And here's the brutal truth most people will never accept. This phase is necessary. You must break to begin again. You must lose what was false to discover what is real. You must be brought to your knees before you learn to stand. So don't run from the shattering. Welcome it. Because behind it lies the truth of who you really are. There is no growth without confrontation. There is no transformation without destruction. And there is no strength without the willingness to face your own weakness. You'll want to escape it, to bury yourself in noise, to scroll, to drink, to binge, to numb, anything to avoid the mirror. But this time, you don't. You stare into the wreckage. You breathe through the chaos. You let the pain carve you. Because pain is no longer the enemy. It's the chisel. And the mind you seek, the relentless, unbreakable mind, forged in fire, can only be built from the ashes of who you were. This is your first rebirth, not the glamorous kind, not the kind people applaud, but the kind that makes you dangerous in the best way. Because from this point on, your life will never be the same. Why? Because you're no longer pretending. You now see things for what they are. You no longer idolize comfort. You no longer protect your ego. You invite challenge. You embrace discomfort. You demand accountability from yourself before anyone else. That's what separates you from the masses. While they run from the mirror, you stand still and watch yourself burn. Not out of self-hatred, but out of ruthless self-respect. You know what's worse than pain? Living a lie. Wasting your time being half of what you were meant to become. So you welcome the breakdown, because on the other side of it is clarity. Clarity of your flaws, clarity of your patterns, clarity of your potential. And this clarity is the fuel for your evolution. The people who never break, never grow, they plateau, they coast, they stay in their shallow comfort and call it peace. But you want more. You're not here to survive. You're here to ascend. So let the shattering do its work. Let the version of you that was addicted to mediocrity fall away. Let the coward die. Let the complainer burn. Let the ego melt. Because what will rise from the rubble will not be soft. It will not be blind. It will not be broken. It will be real. And reality, when faced with courage, becomes your greatest ally. This is not the end. This is the beginning. The start of your reconstruction. The moment you stop being a slave to your habits, your fears, your stories, and become the architect of your mind. Welcome to the shattering. Let it break you, so it can build you. Phase 2. The Audit of Shadows. You cannot conquer what you refuse to examine. After the shattering, there is no more hiding. The dust hasn't settled, but the illusion is gone. And in its place stands something far more dangerous. The truth. Now comes the next phase. The one most avoid. The one that separates those who talk about transformation from those who embody it. This is the Audit of Shadows. It begins when you stop asking, why is life like this? And start asking, why am I like this? This is the phase where you go into the basement of your psyche, alone, unarmed, and unfiltered. And you take inventory of everything you've buried. Your fears, your insecurities, your addictions, your patterns, your self-sabotage, your delusions of control, your hunger for validation, your irrational envy, your tendency to betray yourself to please others, your inability to say no, your passive-aggressive manipulation, your refusal to set boundaries. All of it. No more sugarcoating. No more pretending you just have bad luck. No more acting like other people are always the problem. This is where you rip open every sealed vault inside your mind and look at what's festering. Not to hate it, not to run from it, but to understand it. Because understanding is power, and power is what you're here to build. But let's make one thing clear. This isn't a spiritual vacation. This isn't a chance to light incense and call your shadow a wounded inner child, so you can feel good without doing the work. This is war. And in war, you don't negotiate with your enemy. You study it. You learn its tactics. You observe how it moves. You analyze how it infiltrates your mind when you're tired, alone, or under pressure. You identify the triggers. You map out the weakness. This is not self-loathing. This is self-leadership. Because when you study your darkness, you strip it of its mystery. And once it's no longer mysterious, it becomes manageable. Once it's manageable, it becomes transformable. And once it's transformable, it becomes your compass. Yes, you read that right. Your shadow is not your enemy. It's your guide. It reveals where you must go next. If you're afraid of confrontation, your shadow tells you to learn to speak with power. If you're insecure around others' success, your shadow tells you to face your own lack of discipline. If you lie to feel accepted, your shadow reveals that you don't accept yourself yet. Every weakness is a map, a direct line to the part of you that must evolve. But this map is written in discomfort. And if you don't have the courage to read it, you'll wander in circles your whole life. Most people never perform this audit. They skip it because it feels too dark. They mask it with fake positivity. They say things like, I'm just a perfectionist, or that's just who I am, and they laugh it off. never realizing they're building a prison and calling it personality. But you're here to go deeper. You're here to burn the mask and build a mirror. This audit is brutal. You'll find out that you're not as noble as you thought, that your intentions haven't always been pure, that your victim story had holes in it, that your pain has made you sharp in some ways and spiteful in others. But this is not the time to run from what you see. This is the time to own it, because you can't change what you won't claim. And here's the beauty hiding in all this darkness. Once you confront it, you gain authority over it. Your fear no longer owns you. Your past no longer defines you. Your triggers no longer derail you, because you've named them. You've sat with them. You've studied them like sacred texts. And that level of self-knowledge, that's where mastery begins. This is where you stop being a puppet pulled by emotional strings. This is where you stop outsourcing your worth. This is where you refuse to live at the mercy of your unexamined habits. You don't just walk into the darkness in this phase. You map it, you name it, and you start carving a way out. The Audit of Shadows is not about perfection. It's not about never having flaws again. It's about becoming so intimately aware of your flaws that they never catch you off guard again. You become the observer of your mind, not the servant of it. You become a tactician of your behavior, not a victim of it. And most importantly, you start building a mind that is not afraid of any part of itself. That is the root of power. Not pretending to be perfect, but knowing yourself so deeply that nothing within you remains in the dark. This is the Audit of Shadows, and it is your next step toward becoming unstoppable. Phase 3. The reversal of comfort. Comfort is a prison disguised as peace. By now, you've shattered the illusion. You've stared into the depths of your shadow. You've seen the mechanisms of your own self-deception. But awareness alone isn't enough. If you stop here, you'll fall into another trap, thinking insight equals transformation. It doesn't. Knowledge without action is just another comfort, another illusion, another way to pretend you're growing while avoiding what actually changes you. So now begins the phase that breaks most people, the reversal of comfort. This is where the real war begins, because now you deliberately walk away from the things that kept you soft. You reject the fake peace that came from avoidance. You remove the cushions that made weakness tolerable, and you start inviting discomfort into your daily life, not out of masochism, but out of necessity. This is the phase where you flip the script on everything you were taught to chase. You stop running toward what's easy. You start pursuing what's difficult on purpose, not to punish yourself, but to forge yourself. Because what used to feel safe, your patterns, your vices, your distractions, are now exposed for what they really were: traps. They dulled your instincts. They numbed your potential. They made you mistake pleasure for power. But not anymore. You now see comfort as the silent killer it truly is. The enemy dressed as a friend. The lullaby that sings warriors back to sleep. And so, you reverse it. You start doing the opposite of what your impulses tell you. You get up when you want to stay down. You speak truth when you want to stay silent. You train when you want to rest. You reflect when you want to scroll. You listen to pain, not to suffer, but to learn. You stop making decisions based on feeling and start making decisions based on alignment. Every action now has purpose. Every choice now sharpens your edge. You become intentional with everything. How you eat, how you think, how you speak, how you rest, how you spend your time, how you react when you're triggered. Every moment is a battleground where discipline either wins or dies. And in this reversal, you begin to build a different kind of confidence. Not the shallow confidence of appearance or status, but the indestructible confidence that only comes from keeping your word to yourself, over and over again. You learn to find joy in doing what others avoid. You learn to find power in facing what others flee from. You learn to take the discomfort most people run from and make it your ally. And here's the paradox that flips your entire worldview. The more discomfort you can hold without breaking, the more peace you gain. Why? Because peace doesn't come from the absence of problems. It comes from the presence of power. And power is earned in pressure. But don't romanticize it. This phase will hurt. Your mind will rebel. Your body will resist. Your old identity will scream. Your excuses will come dressed as logic. You'll have every reason to go back, to soften again, to say, I've done enough. But if you want to be unstoppable, you don't listen. You push, not recklessly, but relentlessly. You push with intention. You push with structure. You push until you become the kind of person that doesn't need motivation, because your identity has taken over. You no longer think, should I do this? You just do it, because it's who you are now. Discipline replaces doubt. Order replaces chaos. Standards replace emotion. And while the world keeps selling you shortcuts, you become the one who builds something real. You become the one who others look at and say, how the hell are they so grounded? How are they so calm under pressure? How do they stay consistent while everyone else breaks? The answer is simple. You reversed comfort. You chose the fire. And you stayed in it long enough for it to purify you. This is not a phase you visit. This is a lifestyle you claim. A life where you no longer pursue ease. You pursue expansion. You no longer ask, is this comfortable? You ask, does this make me stronger? And the difference between those two questions is the difference between being average and being unstoppable. Welcome to the reversal of comfort. You are no longer running from the fire. You are the fire. Phase 4. The observation of truth. When you stop reacting, you start perceiving. This is the phase where your mind begins to evolve beyond emotion, beyond story, beyond impulse. Because now, after walking through discomfort and confronting yourself, something strange happens. You begin to see. Not with the eyes you used before. Not with the clouded lens of ego, fear, or approval seeking. You begin to observe the world, and more importantly, yourself, with a level of clarity that feels almost alien. You're not reacting anymore. You're studying. You're tracking. You're perceiving. Welcome to the observation of truth. At this point, most of your illusions are gone. You're no longer running on delusion. You've killed off the weak narratives. You've exposed the emotional dependencies. And now, without all the noise in your head, you begin to notice the mechanics of reality. You begin to understand why people act the way they do. You see through manipulation. You feel the motives behind their smiles. You detect the fear behind their arrogance. You see the wounds behind their cruelty. You're no longer confused by their behavior because you've seen it in yourself. You've gone to war with those same demons. You've survived the same psychological storms. And because of that, you're not shaken anymore. This is what separates the warrior from the wanderer. The ability to observe without absorbing. You don't need to internalize people's projections. You don't need to react to their chaos. You don't need to fight every battle, because now you understand the terrain. And when you understand the terrain, you stop falling into traps. You no longer get baited into arguments that cost your peace. You no longer chase validation that's worthless. You no longer believe compliments that don't align with truth, because you now know what truth feels like. Truth isn't loud. It doesn't beg to be seen. It doesn't scream for attention. It sits quietly, waiting for those disciplined enough to perceive it. And that's what you've become. Disciplined enough to see, strong enough to handle what you see, and wise enough to use what you see to navigate life with precision. But this observation isn't just external. It turns inward too. You start watching your own mind like a strategist. You study your habits. You track your emotional spikes. You monitor your inner dialogue. You ask questions like, why did I just react that way? What fear is driving this hesitation? What belief is shaping this perception? What pattern is repeating itself here? And every time you answer honestly, you remove another chain from your mental cage. You stop lying to yourself about what you want. You stop pretending you're okay with things that disgust you. You stop calling anxiety normal when it's just avoidance in disguise. This is the phase where radical honesty becomes your weapon, not to shame yourself, but to free yourself. Because with observation comes understanding, and with understanding comes choice. You now see that most people don't act from reason. They act from programming. They don't live. They repeat. They're just reacting to life, bouncing from trigger to trigger, never seeing the puppet strings guiding them. But you've stepped off the stage. You've cut the strings. You're not being pulled anymore. You're watching. You're learning. You're strategizing. And with every observation, your power increases. You begin to move differently. You stop rushing decisions. You pause before you respond. You ask better questions. You make sharper moves. You've developed detachment. Not because you don't care, but because you care enough to respond with wisdom instead of reflex. You're not driven by emotion. You direct it. You're not obsessed with control. You command your influence within the chaos. And when you speak now, it's not to be heard. It's to impact. Because you only speak when you've observed enough to say something true. This is why your presence begins to change. People don't know how to explain it, but they feel it. They sense your awareness, your stillness, your edge. They can't manipulate you. They can't rush you. They can't throw you off your center, because you are not in their game anymore. You're watching the game from above. You see their tactics. You see the unspoken dynamics. You see what they think they're hiding. And it's not because you're better. It's because you've become conscious. This is where true happiness begins to emerge. Not as a mood, but as a consequence of clarity. When you understand how things work, you stop being surprised by them. And when you're not surprised, you're not shaken. You're calm. You're collected. You're dangerous. You no longer operate in reaction. You operate in alignment. This is the observation of truth. And once you've seen, you can never unsee. So use your sight wisely, because now you are no longer walking blind. You are navigating life with eyes wide open, and that alone makes you unstoppable. you fall back, or will you redirect the energy? Because that's what redirection truly is. It's not repression, it's transmutation. It's taking that same raw, chaotic emotional energy and aiming it somewhere productive. You don't ignore your anger. You channel it into your mission. You don't suppress your fear. You convert it into preparation. You don't silence your ambition. You discipline it into consistency. You don't pretend you're above desire. You refine it into purpose. And it's in this discipline that you start to rebuild yourself. Deliberately, consciously, powerfully. You are no longer led by feelings. You lead your feelings. You no longer operate based on mood. You operate based on standards. Because now, you've set the code. And the code is unbreakable. You wake up when you said you would. You eat what fuels your system. You speak with integrity, even when it's uncomfortable. You show up, no matter how you feel. You don't need to feel like it anymore. Because you are it. That's the shift. You stop acting like a disciplined person, and you become one. Not as a costume, not as a performance, but as your default operating system. You learn to honor your word, not just to others, but to yourself. And let's be clear, this isn't about perfection. You will slip. You will falter. But in those moments, you return to the code. You don't spiral. You don't self-destruct. You self-correct. Because your identity is now built on consistency, on awareness, on choice. And while others seek balance through chaos, you create balance through command. This phase makes people uncomfortable to watch. They'll call you intense. They'll say you're obsessed. They'll say you've changed. And they'll be right. Because when you redirect your energy with discipline, you stop being relatable to people who still react to life. You start standing out. And the world doesn't like outliers. But you didn't come here to blend in. You came here to become exceptional. This is the turning point. The bridge between who you were and who you were meant to be. Redirection is about reclaiming your sovereignty. No more being yanked around by every thought, every urge, every mood. You have stepped into the role of governor of your mind. And every action you take, every habit you strengthen, every emotion you convert, builds a system that makes strength automatic. That's the goal. To make your standards so integrated that mediocrity becomes impossible. To make discipline not something you try to have, but something you are. Because once that happens, the chaos loses its grip. The distractions lose their flavor. The noise fades. And what remains is focus. Unshakable focus. And from that focus, you execute. Daily. Relentlessly. Without applause. Without dopamine. Without the need to prove anything. Because you already know who you are. And you already know where you're going. This is the discipline of redirection. Where weakness is not denied. It's repurposed. Where emotion is not suppressed. It's converted. Where every moment becomes an opportunity to refine the weapon that is your mind. This is where power becomes predictable. And once it's predictable, it becomes inevitable. Phase 6. The Emergence. You do not return to the world the same. You return as a weapon. You began this path as someone lost in illusion. Distracted. Conditioned. Trapped in a maze of your own unconscious patterns. But now, you've shattered the illusion. You've confronted your shadow. You've reversed your comfort-seeking nature. You've trained your perception to see truth. You've mastered your emotional reflexes with the discipline of redirection. And what emerges from this brutal process is not a version of you. It is the core of you, refined, sharpened, unchained. This is the emergence. And it's not loud. It's not showy. It doesn't need to be. Because true transformation doesn't scream. It radiates. You carry yourself differently now. There's a stillness in your presence, a gravity in your words, an intensity in your silence that others can't explain. But they feel it. Because you are no longer ruled by fear. You are no longer pulled by impulse. You are no longer seduced by comfort. You've walked through fire, and you kept walking. And now, there's nothing left to prove. Not to the world, not to the people who underestimated you, not even to the version of yourself that once begged for acceptance. You've killed off the need for validation, and in its place, you've built conviction. You no longer chase meaning. You generate it. You no longer search for peace. You embody it. You no longer ask who you are. You define it, moment by moment, choice by choice, act by act. Because now, you move from principle, from vision, from a place within you that's been purified by suffering and strengthened by action. This is why people won't understand you anymore. You've become calm in chaos, sharp in confusion, grounded in adversity. Where others panic, you pause. Where others complain, you calculate. Where others give up, you grow stronger. You have become what the world cannot control. And that makes you dangerous. Not because you seek to harm, but because you no longer need to seek anything. You've cultivated an inner world that's immune to manipulation. And that is rare. Because most people are still running from themselves, still chasing external highs, still reacting to the past, still trying to fill an internal void with external distractions. But not you. You become whole, not perfect, whole. You've embraced the darkness within you, without letting it rule you. You've owned your story, without being defined by it. You've reprogrammed your instincts, without losing your humanity. This is not a return to normal. There is no going back. There is no old you to revive. There is only the forged version, the one born from fire, forged by pressure, and hardened by radical self-respect. You now move with discipline like it's in your blood. You act with clarity like it's instinct. You speak with precision like it's muscle memory. You no longer think about power. You are power. And while the world screams louder and gets softer, you've grown quieter and become stronger. You've learned to lead yourself. That's what emergence is. It's when you no longer try to be something. You simply are it. It's when your internal world is so structured, so tested, so aligned, that no external chaos can shake it. You are no longer a reactor. You are a creator. You are no longer guided by fear. You are guided by vision. You are no longer another product of the system. You are now a force that bends systems to your will. Your decisions now create momentum. Your presence now commands respect. Your standards now repel the weak and attract the strong. You don't have to tell people you've changed. They'll feel it. In your silence, in your boundaries, in your energy. You are no longer accessible to chaos. You are no longer a match for mediocrity. You are no longer tied to the patterns that once broke you. You have emerged, not as a better version of yourself, but as the real version of yourself, stripped of falsehoods, excuses, and emotional dependency. This is your new baseline. From here, you build. From here, you lead. From here, you command. And the world, it won't know what hit it. Because you didn't just go through change. You became the embodiment of transformation. This is the emergence. And now, you are unstoppable. You began this journey like most do, buried beneath layers of noise, fear, and false identity. Conditioned to avoid pain, programmed to seek comfort, taught to chase happiness, not earn it. But now you know the truth. To be happy is not to be safe. To be happy is not to be entertained. To be truly happy, to be free, is to have the courage to face reality as it is, not as you wish it was. And that path, this transformation, is not a moment. It's a war. One fought through 6 brutal, beautiful phases. Phase 1, the shattering, where your illusions collapsed and the mask burned away, where you saw yourself not through fantasy, but through raw, unfiltered truth. Phase 2, the Audit of Shadows, where you went inward and examined the chaos, where you studied your flaws, your triggers, your patterns, and turned your darkness into data. Phase 3, the reversal of comfort, where you flipped your wiring, where you chose pain on purpose, so you could build strength where weakness once lived. Phase 4, the observation of truth, where you trained your perception, where you began seeing people, not through emotion, but through intention, and started seeing yourself with radical clarity. Phase 5, the discipline of redirection, where every emotion became a weapon, where impulse became fuel, where chaos became a signal, and you became the one who decides what every moment means. Phase 6, the emergence, where all of it came together, where you stopped pretending, stopped chasing, stopped reacting, and became the force no one could move. This isn't just mindset. This is alchemy, the total transformation of a reactive human into a conscious weapon, one who bends reality not by wishful thinking, but by relentless discipline, clarity, and power. So now ask yourself, do you want to go back? Back to distraction? Back to numbness? Back to being another echo in the crowd? Or will you rise? Will you use the pain as your compass? Will you use your weakness as your map? Will you keep sculpting until your mind becomes a fortress, unshakable, unstoppable, unbreakable? The choice is yours. But remember, those who run from the darkness stay trapped inside it. Those who face it become something the darkness fears. And you've already started. Now finish the job.